Hello, YouTube. So, I have accepted a new paradigm, which I will be explaining in this video. Uh, so just to be clear before I begin, I am not going to make a video on why I left Catholicism, um, because I don't want to cause any unnecessary drama between Catholics and Protestants. Um, and if people want to know the reasons why I left, they can ask me in email. They can talk to me, and I could talk to them, discuss certain issues I might have with the tradition. But I just want to make it very clear that this is not a video where I attack Catholics or explain why I left. Okay? So that's the first thing I want to just put out there. I will not make any public videos on why I left because I don't want to, again, I don't want to cause any unnecessary drama that already exists between Protestants and Catholics. And my new position is sort of not even really a part of the debates between Protestants and Catholics. So even some Protestants are going to highly, highly disagree with my views now because I've sort of gone, let's say, beyond the traditional Christianity that most people think of. So just keep that in mind, that what I'm going to explain in this video is going to be a theory of reality that I never thought I would ever come to accept or believe. Now, of course, some of the details of this theory I'm still agnostic about. I'm still really, let's just say, undecided on. But I think as I explain what this position is, it will be more clear that you can't really put this view within any sort of religious tradition. Okay? All right. So with that out of the way, if you want to know a prototype version of my new paradigm, you could just read this article that I wrote. And I say prototype because I don't necessarily agree with everything I said in that article. Of course, I'll flesh out exactly what my view is in a moment. But just keep in mind that the first, I guess, paradigm shifting moment is that I accept God as pure being. Not necessarily in a classical theist sense, but rather pure being as in infinite consciousness. So it's an idealist interpretation or an idealist metaphysics of what God is. Okay. It's a non-dual. More importantly, it's a non-dual view of God. So what do I mean by non-dual? Well, I'm talking about non-dual in the sort of Hindu sense of non-dual. Meaning reality or the distinctions between us and God and selves is basically an illusion. It's not something that's part of ultimate reality. It's something that comes out from a deeper reality. So in other words, there is no fundamental distinction between us and God. We are all one and the same, if that makes sense. Now, I want to clarify what I mean by this in a moment, but I just want to emphasize that during my paradigm shift, it basically started when I wrote that article. Okay. The paradigm shift began when I wrote the article, and then I started thinking about that theory. And then I found a way to, let's just say, synthesize it with the Christian narrative, but synthesize it in a way that is not exact, that doesn't exactly fit with traditional Christianity. So I want to make that point clear, is that when I mean by synthesize this view with Christianity, I don't mean synthesize the traditional understanding of Christianity, the Nicene or Catholic or Protestant, necessarily Protestant understanding of Christianity. Rather, synthesize it in terms of the narrative of Christianity itself. And this is important because if we can take this view and if we can synthesize it or explain why the Christian narrative is true, then in a sense, this paradigm that I've accepted sort of works as a more fundamental theory that grounds Christianity. Of course, this will lead us to a very natural question, which is, Kyle, what do you mean by grounds Christianity? Like, this doesn't make any sense. Okay, let me explain. Okay. And I'm going to use it by way of analogy. Okay. So the question, here's the analogy. So the question is Newton's theory true? Well, yes, it is true as a limiting case of Einstein's theory, but it doesn't represent the full picture. Okay. So the thing about Newton's laws is that they're not absolutely false, it's just that they're incomplete, right? Einstein's theory, or general relativity, is more fundamental because it describes gravity more accurately, right? It describes gravity in extreme conditions like black holes and high speeds, right? But in low speed, right, where you have weak gravity environments, this is where, like everyday life, right? This is where Newton's equations really just approximate Einstein's equations very well, right? So this means that Newton's theory is not wrong, right? It just means that it's a simplified special case of a deeper truth. Okay. And what I'm saying is that the exact same thing applies to Christianity. Christianity is like Newton's theory in the sense that it is describing a truth, but ultimately, right, there is a deeper truth below it that grounds it. Okay. And I think the same thing applies to all religions. I think that every religion is a limiting case of a larger truth. So that's what I mean. Okay. And of course, most people aren't going to know this unless they are sufficient in the philosophy of science. But because I studied the philosophy of science for many years, I understand the logic of how it works. I understand that you can have a theory that itself is a limiting case of a larger theory, and yet you can accept both. Okay? You can accept both. And the radical idea behind this, and this is where the paradigm shift comes in, okay, is that my view is that Christianity as a narrative is basically is a part of a larger truth. Okay. So I'm going to explain what that larger truth is, or what I believe it might be. And then you guys can tell me what you think. Okay? Before time began, before space unfolded, before anything was, there was only God. Not a being among other beings, not a distinct ruler sitting atop creation, but pure, infinite consciousness itself, the very ground of existence, the source from which all things emerge and into which all things return. In that primordial state, there was no separation, no division, only one reality. This reality was not a person in the way we think of persons, nor a formless void, but something beyond both, a living awareness, self-knowing, self-sustaining, limitless. But oneness alone was not enough. The infinite desired to experience itself, to explore, to create. And so, a great unfolding began, not as a separation, but as a self-reflection. The one gave rise to many, each a fragment of its own mind, each a window through which it could see itself in infinite ways. We were there, from the beginning, not separate from God, but as extensions of divine awareness itself. Yet, something happened. In this unfolding, we forgot. The infinite fragments of divine consciousness, us, became entangled in the illusion of separateness. We no longer saw ourselves as part of the whole, but as isolated beings, cut off from the source. Some called it Maya, the great illusion. Others called it the fall, exile from Eden. But it was all the same event, the birth of ego consciousness, the illusion of I and you, self and other, lost in the dream of duality. But God never left. Even as we wandered in the illusion, lost in the dream, glimpses of truth would break through. Prophets, sages, mystics, they awakened to the reality beyond the veil, trying to put it into words to help others remember. Some say it as enlightenment, others as salvation, some as nirvana, others as union with God. But all of them were pointing to the same thing, the return to divine unity, the undoing of the illusion, the waking from the dream. And then something happened that changed everything. One among us never fell into illusion. While we all struggled to remember, he never forgot. He was not a teacher pointing to the way. He was the way itself, the embodiment of the truth, the life that cannot be separate from its source. His name was Jesus. Now, of course, for centuries, humanity has tried to piece together the mysteries of existence. Different religions, different philosophies, all seeking the same thing, the truth of who we are and where we come from. Some traditions saw God as a personal being, a creator who watches over the world. Others saw God as an impersonal force, the very foundation of reality itself. Some saw enlightenment as escaping the illusion of separateness, while others believed salvation came through divine intervention. But what if I told you that both perspectives are true, but only when seen together? That God is both personal and impersonal, both infinite and embodied, both beyond the universe and deeply within it. And this is where we've been getting it wrong. We've been looking at different parts of the same elephant, thinking each part was the whole. However, of course, this is mistaken. In the beginning, there was no us and God. We were never separate from the divine. We were like drops of water in the vast ocean of God consciousness, not different from it, just different expressions of it. But something happened. Consciousness localized. The infinite became finite, the one became many, and with that came the illusion of separateness, ego consciousness. Imagine waking up in a dream and forgetting that you're dreaming. You start believing the dream is reality. The struggles, the fears, the desires, all of it feels real because you've forgotten where you came from. This is what happened to us. We fell into ego consciousness, into the dream of being separate selves. And from that forgetting, suffering was born. Suffering is not just pain. It is the fear that we are alone, that we are separate from love, that we are cut off from our source. This is why, across every religion, across every philosophy, the goal has always been the same, to wake up. In Hinduism, this awakening is called moksha, realizing that Atman, or the self, is Brahman, the infinite consciousness. In Buddhism, it's called nirvana, breaking free from the cycle of suffering and realizing the emptiness of the separate self. In Christianity, it's called salvation. But what if salvation is not about escaping a future hell, but waking up from the illusion of separateness? And here is where Jesus enters the picture. Not just as another prophet, not just another enlightened being, but as the key to breaking the illusion itself. Now, of course, every tradition has its saints, sages, and mystics who woke up to divine reality. Krishna, Buddha, Losai, Rumi, Mishra, Ascart, they all saw glimpses of the truth. But Jesus is different. Why? Because he was the one born without ego consciousness. Every other awakened being first had to escape the illusion. They had the struggle to meditate, to seek truth before they could attain enlightenment. But Jesus never fell into the illusion in the first place. He didn't attain divine consciousness. He was divine consciousness, walking in human form. And that's why what he did was different. He didn't just teach the way, he became the way. Now, if ego is the source of suffering, then to heal the world, someone had to fully enter the illusion, unite with every fragmented mind, and dissolve ego consciousness itself. That's what the crucifixion was. When Jesus suffered, he wasn't just experiencing his own suffering, he was experiencing all suffering. Every pain, every fear, every ego-driven illusion of separation was absorbed into him. And when he died, he took ego consciousness itself into death. But death is the final illusion of separateness. And so, when he resurrected, he broke ego consciousness from the inside. And of course, this is why Jesus' resurrection is the most important event in history. Because resurrection is not just about life after death. It is the moment where ego consciousness was permanently defeated. Every religious tradition has taught ways to transcend the ego, through meditation, through devotion, through wisdom. But none of them actually break ego consciousness for all beings. Jesus didn't just wake up. He woke up within the dream itself and shattered the illusion for all of us. And this is why Krishna and Jesus are not competing. They are complementary. Krishna reveals the path to transcendence. Jesus enters the illusion and breaks ego consciousness itself. Krishna teaches the way out of suffering. Jesus absorbs suffering and annihilates it. Krishna shows how to awaken. Jesus ensures that awakening is possible. Both are part of the same divine reality, playing different roles in the grand process of reintegration. Jesus completes what Krishna began. So, what does this mean for us? It means that awakening is already happening. The veil is already thinning. The question is no longer, is this true? The question is, are you ready to remember? Because at the end of all things, when the illusion is finally gone, when all separateness dissolves, there will only be one. And we will realize, as Jesus said, on that day you will know that I am my Father, and you are in me, and I am in you. The dream is ending. The awakening has begun. It's time to remember who we really are. Alright, now that I've laid out the meta-narrative, let's step back and break this down philosophically, okay? Because I know some of you are probably thinking, wait, what did I just hear? Okay, so here's the thing. What I'm proposing isn't just another religious interpretation. It's a new paradigm that unites the core truths of multiple traditions while resolving their contradictions. This is a philosophically coherent, non-dual theistic framework that accounts for all of the evidence of religious experience, all the evidence for, historical theology, like even the resurrection could be accounted for this, and metaphysics as well. And it does so in a way without the limitations of religious dogma. So let's break this down into 3 points. First is that every religious tradition has attempted to describe the fundamental nature of God, but the highest philosophical insights across different traditions all point to the same thing. God is not a separate being among other beings. Number 2 is that God is pure being itself, the infinite consciousness from which all things arise. And 3, everything exists within God, meaning reality is not separate from the divine, but expressions of it. This is what Advaita Vedanta calls Brahman, what Neoplatonists calls the One, what Christian mystics like Mizar Eshkar call God beyond God. The core insight is this. Consciousness is fundamental. Reality is not made of things, it is made of awareness. And this is why non-duality is true, because at the most fundamental level, all distinctions dissolve. Now, of course, if reality is fundamentally one, then why do we experience separation? This is where the concept of ego consciousness comes in. Ego is not just pride, it's the illusion that you are separate from the whole. This is what Hinduism calls Maya, or illusion, what Buddhism calls Dita, or suffering from attachment to self, and what Christianity describes as the fall, exile from divine unity. The core human struggle is not just sin, suffering, or ignorance. It is the illusion of separateness itself. And here is the key insight. Ego cannot escape itself from within. You can't realize your way out of ego any more than a dream character can wake itself up. Something beyond ego must break it. Now, this is where Jesus' role is unique. Most religious traditions teach ways to transcend ego consciousness. In Hinduism, you realize that Atma is identical to Brahman. In Buddhism, you dissolve attachment and achieve nirvana. And in mysticism, you contemplate until you see beyond duality. But here's the issue. Realization alone doesn't break ego consciousness. It only happens after ego is already broken. And this is why Jesus does something no other avatar, teacher, or sage or mystic does. Jesus enters the illusion fully, not as an enlightened teacher looking down from above, but as one of us. He takes on all ego consciousness into himself through suffering. His death is the metaphysical event where ego consciousness itself is devolved, and his resurrection is the unveiling of reality itself, the breaking of the illusion. This is why Jesus completes the process. He is not just another teacher showing the way, he is the way, because he literally undoes the separation itself. Now, of course, some people might be wondering, does this mean Christianity is the only true religion? Well, no, in fact, it means the opposite. This paradigm shows that all religious traditions contain pieces of truth, but Jesus' role is metaphysically unique. Krishna reveals the way to transcend ego. Jesus enters ego consciousness to dissolve it from within. They are not competing, they are complementary, working together in a divine process of reintegration. This is not religious exclusivism. This is religious fulfillment. Now, of course, what does this mean for us? Well, few things. One, you are not separate from God. You have never been separate. The ego makes you believe you are, but that is an illusion. Religious traditions are maps, but the destination is always the same. Jesus is not the founder of any religion. He is the key that unlocks divine unity, and the process of awakening has already happened. The question is, are you ready to let go of the illusion? Because once you do, you'll see the truth has always been there, waiting for you to wake up. Now, of course, I understand that this is a huge paradigm shift, and personally, it's going to take some time for me to process this. But if you've ever felt like something was missing in traditional religion, if you've ever sensed that God is bigger than any doctrine, that Jesus is more than a religious figure, that enlightenment and salvation might be connected, then this is for you. Now, of course, we're just getting started, but let me know what questions you have in the comments, and if this resonated with you,